Welcome to 8 Cubes. I am KMBest. He is Lambie Series. This is, of course, our midweek episode on Lambie's channel. And we're going to start it out after the OTA with what Lambie thinks might still be the best deck. Thanos, he thinks it's still alive. Tell me what you got.
Right, so we obviously got a nerf here whereby Mind Stone went to 2 costs, right? So you're not gonna play Mind Stone on turn 1 anymore, but like playing Mind Stone on turn 2 into your other stones and then like the usual Thanos game plan is still really strong. Also, one thing I want to mention about Thanos, which is crazy, is that like a lot of the good opening hands in Thanos now have nothing to do with actually Mind Stone. It's like literally you play a stone, you play a Psylocke, then you play a 4-cost Mockingbird, then you play a 4-cost Cull, then you prof something, then you Alive something, or you blob something. It's like Mind Stone is important for sure, but like the general idea of the deck is it's just an amazing play stuff early into more stuff late game deck, and it does so consistently whether I draw or don't draw the Mind Stone. Don't get me wrong, I'm definitely trying to tell you that it's enough for sure, but like in my testing I haven't felt like a huge impact. I guess one of the like most significant things I felt with the Mind Stone nerf is I can't play like Jeff plus Mind Stone on turn 3 if I top deck Mind Stone. That was definitely relevant. Or like Psylocke plus Mind Stone into like on turn 3 into like a 5 on turn 4. Yeah, it's relevant. But outside of these scenarios, like every other scenario, I've been like, wow, this deck is still just insane. And I don't want to understate the fact that a lot of it has to do with probably Hope and Mockingbird. KM, what do you think?
Yeah, we'll cover why Thanos manages to like sort of duct tape himself back together every time in the next section. But in this section, I will say, like, I think it had a meaningful impact in one specific area. And I actually am very happy that it had this impact because, A, Thanos got nerfed, less people are playing Thanos. That's not what I'm talking about, but it's worth mentioning. B, this means that there's so much less of the like incredibly stupid mirror turn 1 snaps. Because with Mockingbird in the deck, Mind Stone is so far and away the best card you could ever see because it makes your Mockingbird free. And you end up in this situation where like a turn 1 Mind Stone snap is like A, something you basically always have to do, and B, just a really annoying dynamic to deal with. So I think I'm glad that the best deck in the game no longer has the sort of snap profile of a combo deck. Because when you look at the other decks that do that, it's like, okay, discard and Phoenix Force will do that, or destroy and Phoenix Force when they get like Nico turn 1 into like blowing some stuff up. That's when like a deck with a nut draw will do that, right? Having the best deck in the game have that snap profile was, I think, legitimately very annoying. And especially when it comes to playing mirrors, I'm just glad. I think they made them mildly more palatable. I don't know if they got it all the way to good, because I think Mockingbird is just kind of like, okay. But like, I think they made it mildly more palatable. And I'm happy that they went this direction. I also think we should talk about the Psylocke nerf, because the Psylocke nerf, people got a little mad at me for thinking it was a good one. I think it is. Psylocke was A, only ever played in Thanos. B, very important to the game plan that Thanos had post Time Stone that allowed you to like bridge these 5s and 6s into your deck with all these stones, because you go like you like turbo out something early, and doing that is like kind of important to what Thanos does. And I guess C was a key component in the most annoying play pattern in the game, which was turn 4 Professor X. So I think hitting all that stuff, yeah, I'm good with that. I think that's good enough for me. I actually am a little more down on Thanos than you are. I think it's very much being held together with duct tape. That's not to say it's the bad deck right now, or even not the best deck. It could very well be. But it's like, there are going to be some real clunkers when you play this and you don't get the cards the deck is leaning on. Honest to God. Like, there are some really, really big power spikes in this deck, in my opinion.
Yeah, I want to echo one sentiment regarding the Psylocke, which is that I think it's actually quite a genius nerf on Second Dinner's part, because my first impression was when I saw Psylocke going down to 2-1, I was like, okay, maybe we can remove this card from the deck right now. But when I tested the deck, I was like, it's such a sick nerf, because like you can't remove this card and you're forced to play a 2-1 in your deck right now, because
Yep.
this card, like KM said, enables everything in the deck. Like enables the ramp stuff. It's not really just bridging into turn 5 as well. It's like bridging anything. Like you bridge like from turn 2 to turn 3 because like you skip turn 3 and play a 4 cost on turn 3. Like all these is super relevant with the way the deck is built right now with like Cow Obsidian, Mockingbird, Hope Summers plus Stone on turn 3, that kind of thing into like a vision, which is crazy. And it's only bridgeable by Psylocke. So it's like you are forced to still play the Psylocke, but it's now a 2-1. So that one on SD, good job.
Yeah, I think they nailed that one. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the glue, which is, in our opinion, there are just like a couple cards that Thanos is just better at using than every other deck, and that's what's keeping Thanos afloat. Like, people look at what makes Thanos different, right? And the stones, all that, you know, they are good, but the stones mean that you are better at using some very specific cards. And I can name 3 right off top where Thanos is just the best deck for all of these cards: Mockingbird, Cull Obsidian, and Blob. And I think you could say Hope Summers as well. I don't think Thanos is the best deck for Hope Summers. It's just a good Hope Summers deck, but like it would otherwise not be a deck that could support Hope Summers if there weren't stones in it, right? And so I think when you look at those 4 cards and you're asking, you know, why is Thanos good? What is Thanos' competitive advantage? That's what it is. It's the best Mockingbird deck, it's the best Cull deck, and it's the best Blob deck. And there are no other decks that can use any of those cards as well as Thanos. Nothing. Nobody.
Yeah, so that's quite literally the nail on the head because Thanos now, as much as it used to be the deck that draws a ton of cards with cheap stones and ramps into a big late game, now Thanos is actually the deck with the superb mid game as well, right? Because now they've got like what? Hope, Mockingbird, Cow Obsidian. These are all not really late game cards. These are like mid game cards that bridge you to that super easy Professor X in the late game or like Blob in the late game or whatever. So yeah, Thanos is really supported and being carried by their mid game package right now, which is why the Mind Stone nerf, it obviously felt like a nerf, but like there's still a lot of other things to do despite like not playing a turn 1 Mind Stone. So that's how the deck actually still survives right now. And like KM mentioned, this Thanos deck really just utilizes, especially to me personally, Mockingbird, like on a different level. Like in many other decks that I've been playing, you would be really happy that Mockingbird's like a 2-9 or 3-9. But like in Thanos, right? So 0-9 is like common, by the way. It's a common occurrence, which is crazy because in any other deck, common occurrence for Mockingbird is like 2-9 or 3-9 and you'd be happy with that. In Thanos, 0-9 is just like, it's just there. So Thanos is just the best deck to utilize some of these new cards. And like it's like KM said, the glue that actually puts the deck together still, despite all the nerfs that it's been hit with for the last few weeks.
Right, but that does mean that like Thanos is in, I won't say it's like a super fragile spot, but it's like,
yeah, it's flimsy right now.
Yes, it feels a little flimsy where it's like, all right, all I'm doing and what you're doing is good, but like all you're doing is sort of like, you know, it's like a Darkhawk thing, right? Like what you're doing, Thanos right now, I'm playing a good card, a good card, a good card, a good card, a good card. That's my strategy. And the thing that enables that strategy to be competitive is the fact that you have a 0-9. that's what's going on right now, right? Like if it was just, you know, I'm doing Cull Obsidian stuff, that's not making this deck busted. What's making this deck busted is I'm playing a final turn Blob and a 0-9. Like that's really good, right? And like I do think that while there is a decent chance that like Thanos is a little bit like it really is flimsier than it was, I do think it can still be good. I do think it likely is still good. But it is it's like a house of cards. It's precarious right now. And like the fact that it's still standing, I think it probably will continue to stay standing. But like we are really close to that edge where a lot of Thanos' win rate is being subsidized by Mockingbird. And I would argue probably even more cube rate because of just how unpredictable a 0-9 can be, right? Like a lot of the win rate and probably more of the cube rate is just wrapped up in that card. And I think that like we're really getting close to that point where if they touch Thanos just like one little poke, the whole thing could go.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Because like on a lot of turn 6s right now, I look at my opponent's Thanos board, I'm like, okay, I know they are gonna play the blob here. That's fine, I win. But what if there's a 0-9 accompanied with this blob? Like I think like 9 out of 10 scenarios where they don't have the 0-9, I feel so much better on turn 6. But like the moment they have it, everything just goes out the window. It's like it's a bit like what Proxima did for this card, whereby this random 0-7 suddenly just changes everything and pushes it to the top. And with that being said, the next topic will be about this card.
We're gonna move to that, but I cannot emphasize this enough. If you play out your Mockingbird for like 2 on like turn 5, I'm so okay with that because it means I don't have to think about it on the final turn
like
of the game.
You know it's there. You know it's already there. Yeah.
I can just be like, oh, I'm just gonna beat whatever 6 draw. Discard is still quite good. I get what they were going for with like, okay, well, if we nerf Thanos, discard is like the next best deck, and that's like kind of a problem. So let's nerf the best card in the deck, Apocalypse, right? That all makes sense to me. You could easily convince me Apocalypse is the best card in the deck. But what does not make sense to me is the way in which they nerfed Apocalypse, because I don't think that meaningfully affects him being the best card in the deck. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't really change anything about anything in the entire deck. Nothing changes. You do the exact same stuff. Your Dracula is a 419 instead of a 421. Oh no, I can't play Dracula if he's a 419. Like, this is still a very strong deck. I think the metagame would be in a better spot if this deck can demonstrate a like consistent dominance over Thanos, because this deck has no ability to play tech. This is the modern version of Brood Abs, and that has pluses and minuses. It's the best points deck probably in the game in terms of the balance of consistency and the points you get. But it can't play Shang-Chi, can't play Shadow King, can't play Enchantress, can't do any of that stuff. You have to do it like this, and it's very face up. I honestly think if discard's the best deck in the game, I'm pretty happy with the state of the game.
Same.
That's where I'm at. But I don't know if that's going to apply to everyone. And especially, I think the worse you are at like hand tracking and doing things like that, because of the way MODOK works with the fast forwards, there are some pain points with this deck that could cause people to complain.
Yeah, actually, I everything you say, I really agree with. I just want to ask one question, which is really interesting, because I also don't think the Apocalypse nerf was like it didn't really do much in my opinion, because I tested it as well, and I was like, oh, this is still like a 419, wow.
Yep.
But like, yeah. So I want to ask you, what do you think would be if they were to take this card down a pack? What do you think would be like a very relevant nerf that they could make?
Depends on how relevant you want it. I'll give you a few options.
Okay.
If you want to really hurt the deck, hitting Morbius would do a lot. That would be a lot. If you want to shave a few points off, I think you could hit Swarm by 1 point. I think you could try hitting MODOK by 1 point or 2 points, and I think you could try hitting Proxima. You have like two ways of attacking it, right? The first way of attacking it is attack the things that go super tall. That would be Morbius, right? Dracula, things like that. The second way is attack the free stuff. Swarm, Proxima. That seems like appealing to me. And MODOK is just like, there's probably no reason he should be a 5/8 at this point. That just feels free. Like, you could take a point off him and I'd like, you could make him a 5/5, you'd probably still play him. Like, you could do a lot of stuff to MODOK and discard would not cut that card, which means it's in a similar position to Psylocke, where it's like, this card is so important to what we're doing that you can just keep hitting it with a nerf bat if you want.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, what you mentioned was what I wanted to say as well, which is like MODOK like all the way down to 5/6, and they'll probably still play the card, right? Because it's so integral to the deck. But the one that I really like, and the one that I was about to highlight if you didn't mention it, was which you did, which is Swarm to 2/2.
Yeah.
Swarm to 2/2, honestly, like, because on the final turn is usually where you just play all the swarms, like 4 copies of swarms, and if it's instead of 0/12 of power, it's a 0/8 worth of power, because 2 times 4.
Yep.
Well, it's a lot of difference, right? So, and you'd be less incentivized to keep duplicating swarms as well, because it's like less impactful. So you might change the build a little bit. So yeah, I think maybe that direction would be what would be necessary to take this card down a pack. But for what it's worth, I don't think I want that to happen, because it's been so long since this card has been top of the. Well, it's like the first time this card has been like top of the pack since like a year or so. So keep it there.
Yeah, I think discard being the best deck opens up a lot of ability for counterplay. Like, for example, you never in a million years beat the card Living Tribunal. You just don't do it. Like, there are just ways to beat the deck where it's just like you take advantage of the fact that it has no tech. And I think that's not the worst thing to ever do. Like, I think it's fine to allow a deck like this to be a good deck. It's sort of how I feel about Destroy, right? Where it's like, you know what? There's a lot of ways to interact with this. I guess I'm cool with it. I do think there's less ways to interact with this card than there are to interact with Destroy, though. So like, if you asked me to like, would I rather Destroy or Discard be the best deck? I would take Destroy being the best deck most of the time over Discard. But you know, it is what it is. Lambie, you said you played the Loki Elsa build from my most recent video on the build for about 10 hours. Thoughts?
Yeah. All right, so I started my stream deciding to play Loki, but my previous build was super outdated, so I decided to just like net deck yours from Twitter, and then I played it for like about 8 to 10 hours, and I realized a few things. So if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, you can check out KM's Twitter. The deck is basically an Elsa Hope Loki deck. And the funny thing is, I had so much doubt about Elsa being relevant, but in this deck, it's actually a very, very, very important backup plan. So much so that I actually even cut cable for Mirage, because Mirage is technically 1 extra point which is like that's why I really wanted it in the deck because like the backup plan is really such a strong um points based strategy with the Elsa. Okay, so before I digress too much, I just want to say that Loki right now is, I think, shifting a little bit up in the tier. Not trying to say that it's actually suddenly go against this card, but Thanos for sure slowed down. So that's how Loki can potentially catch up right now. Because what happened last time was that Thanos was just the best deck and Loki could not like fight it because Thanos just had that superb early game, superb mid game, super late game. And like even if you slam Loki on like turn 4, you might not be able to catch up with what the Thanos deck has already done, right? But the thing is now Mindstone is a tad bit slower. So there is a big possibility that like the Loki deck can go toe to toe in the early with Thanos, play their Loki, or even just a bunch of Elsa stats contest with like Thanos's like game and then like play a fair turn 6 with the against the Thanos deck sometimes. So yeah, I play this deck a lot on stream and we just want to say once again that the Elsa game plan is super strong. The Hope Summers in the deck is interesting because I never I felt like if I were to choose between Hope Summers or Elsa, I would really prefer Elsa in this deck because of the extra stats. But like sometimes if you don't draw Loki, the Hope Summers plus Elsa combination lets you play a lot of stuff on turn 6 and buffs a lot of stuff, which is like I said, a very relevant game plan. So yeah, I've just described the deck from the perspective of someone that's trying it for the first time yesterday. But what do you think, KM? Anything else you want to add regarding this Loki Elsa deck?
Just some minor deck credit. Like the shell of it is Tanjo's shell. I'm one card off of what he was doing. He had Mockingbird over Hope. I saw Desmond had adopted it and was playing the Hope in there instead of the Mockingbird, and I had noticed that my Mockingbirds just weren't very good, and so I tried the Hope off of that, and so that's how that's where that build came from. It's very much just like Tanjo and Desmond rather than me. But I think that here's I wanted to ask you something, which was
Yeah.
you replaced Cable with Mirage. Did you think about Sentinel?
Yeah, so Sentinel actually is really interesting because it's just a 2/3 that repeats itself again and
Yes,
again
you
and again
need
and
those
again. And
bodies, and you have a
yeah,
Quinjet. I don't know. I've been thinking about it, and
yeah.
it's like you could really talk me into a Sentinel in that deck. Like I really think you could do that.
Yeah, because with a Quinjet on board and like Hope Summers, it's like a 1/3, right? Which also gets you
Mm-hmm.
extra energy. I feel like it's very possible. It's just that I don't know how many times I'm gonna end up wanting to replay that Sentinel,
Yeah.
but I haven't really tested it yet, so I don't really know.
Yeah, the issue is you end up with like just too much stuff in your hand, right? Because you're doing
True.
kitty stuff, coming back to your hand, you're playing that. It's like not. It's hard to get rid of it from your hand. You have like Coulson, you have Snow Guard. There's just so much stuff. Part of the reason I like Cable though is like in the games when you're Lokiing, it's just better than Mirage by 1 point. It's like
Yeah.
if you're going like like it's like a lot of your Loki games are like, all right, I'm gonna play Quinjet, 2-drop draws a card, Coulson, Loki, right? And in those scenarios, I just rather play Cable. It's just 1 more point. I'm cool with that, right? And so like that's sort of where I'm at with it.
I want to mention one funny thing about this deck, but like for the longest like time, like the last at least 1 or 2 months, it's like the earlier you Loki, the better, right? Like in general. But this deck, the more I play it, you know what the God Curve is? The God Curve is like you play a one
Elsa
cost card,
stuff.
then you play Collector, then you play Hope, then you play Elsa Kitty on the Hope, and then you finally Loki on turn 5 with the Kitty that gets buffed by the Elsa. So it's very weird and interesting. Not really weird, it's more interesting because like this build specifically pushes you to like be incentivized to play a Loki later if you have the God Curve, which is interesting, right? And I tested it versus Thanos also because I wanted to see if like I can delay the Loki versus Thanos. And yeah, actually the Elsa stats are so significant to the point that like I don't mind playing Loki on turn 5 just to like grab extra big stuff to supplement whatever Elsa stuff is already on the board. So it's really like hilarious because we talked about it in the past, like Loki is now a supplement to archetypes instead of its own archetype, right? So like sometimes it does feel that Loki is actually like the backup plan, and this Elsa stats plan could be like the more mainstay plan, which is something that I did not expect, like from this build.
Ridiculous. Remember when this card had 1 less cost and gave 1 more power every time?
What the
were
heck,
they
right?
thinking?
It's crazy.
So the devs gave a specific shout out to Cerebro 5 when discussing Adam Warlock. They were like, we actually think this card is more interesting at 5 because you can play it in Cerebro 5, and at 6 power, it's like probably not good enough to do anything, but it also has no hooks, right? So yeah, okay, all right, we'll play some Cerebro 5. Sure. One issue I ran into is that the main appeal of Cerebro 5 is that it's a deck that runs a lot of good cards and doesn't need to run Cerebro, right?
Yep.
Issue with
Yeah.
that is the world's most lose to Loki Cerebro deck. The just absolutely getting run over because all your cards are good, right? You're giving them a Doctor Doom, you're giving them, Lizard and Luke Cage and Spider-Man and all that stuff. And second issue I ran into, there's no tech in the deck. You maybe have an Enchantress, which, God forbid you give the you give the Loki player your Enchantress, and then there goes your Cerebro. Like, that's the thing. And then 3, the nerf to Miss Marvel, taking her to 4 power, actually kind of crushes this deck. Like,
Yeah.
not having Miss Marvel in there, if we had Miss Marvel, I'd be so into this deck, I think. But without Miss Marvel not being 5 power, I think that's actually like kind of a crushing blow to Cerebro 5. I'm not even joking.
Okay, so I want to actually talk a little bit more in depth about this archetype. It's so weird to call this an archetype because no one has really ever played this to a very like high level or whatever. But so I actually encountered so much Cerebro 5 on my like testing post OTA, which even gave me the ability to come to some conclusions. So the funny thing about Cerebro 5 is, firstly, I agree with you. Yes, it's actually just a deck that doesn't need to run Cerebro at all. Because like if you don't run Cerebro, you can cut back on some of the 5s and play actual good tech cards, right? Like Shang-Chi. You can play like
Or
you can
you could
basically
play
play card.
Hope Summers, right?
Yeah,
Like,
you can even play less 5 cost cards if you don't play the Cerebro. Not trying to say that you need to play a lot of 5 cost cards for your Cerebro to be good, but like you definitely want a certain amount, right? So one of the funny builds that I saw with regards to Cerebro 5, I haven't built it myself, but I intend to do it just for science, which is that I saw someone do something really cool, which is they played Black Swan 3/5 on turn 5, and on the final turn is crazy. They have Ant-Man, Titania, Martyr, like you get what I'm trying to say? It's like they spam 1/5s on the final turn.
yeah, I get
It's
it.
like a token based Cerebro 5 deck. I've never tried it. I saw it like a few times and like, whoa, this makes sense a bit, I guess. But yeah, no, so I think that's maybe more about like spamming 1/5s with Cerebro, spamming 1/5s with Black Swan than Cerebro, to be completely honest. But like, like previously what we used to do with Cerebro 5 is like what they go Wave Doom, and like the more I
Mhm.
look at the deck, I was like, isn't that just a Wave Doom deck that has a Cerebro inside?
Right. Like, the issue
So
I keep coming to with Cerebro 5 is like, okay, you have a Doctor Doom in here, you have a Miles Morales in here, and you want this deck to be a competent mid-range deck. All right, I figured out how to do that. You take out 10 cards that aren't Doctor Doom and Miles Morales, and you play Hope mid-range. We did it.
exactly.
Like, you
Yeah,
had
you
to
play
like
Hope, you
play
play
good
Kitty, you
cards
play
then.
Magneto, play
Yes.
Gladiator. These are probably just
Yes.
better
Play Miss
cards, right?
Marvel. Play like all the good cards. You can put the good cards in your deck. And when you put the good cards in your deck, that tends to help you win games. Lambie indicated that he wanted to discuss the Guardians of the Galaxy, but specifically 2 of the Guardians, Rocket Raccoon and Star Lord. So this topic is named Got 'em because Lambie thinks he might be getting some people in the future.
Yeah, because honestly, right, like from what I've seen with these cards, it's now okay. So Rocket Raccoon is now a 1/5, and then Starlord is like a 2/6. Assuming you guess correctly,
Black
but
Swan,
it's
Cerebro 5 synergy, Rocket Raccoon.
yeah, that's what we mentioned earlier, which makes a lot of sense. Okay,
Yeah.
but now also about the Starlord, which is like when it comes to guessing correctly, it's harder in the early game because obviously there's 3 empty locations, and then you have to like maybe take some risk here and there. But if you're playing like a Sarah style deck, or like I mentioned earlier, a Black Swan style deck, which lets you look at the board and be like, okay, they definitely have to play cards here, so I'm gonna play my Starlord here, I'm gonna play my Raccoon here, and they clearly have to play cards there, right? Because if they don't, well, you win the lane, and if they do, you get a 1/5, you get a 2/6. So I think these low cost guardians might be relevant in like turn 6 spam decks because firstly they're cheap. They fit into like you can fit them with your like pairings on turn 6 to like play them wherever you are. So I'm actually not so excited about like the expensive guardians, even though they got a bit buffed, because they're still less flexible cards. But like the ability to play these like Rocket Raccoons and Starlords for cheap on the final turn with their buffed stats, I think could be a relevant inclusion in certain strategies. I don't know how good they will be overall in terms of like tier status, but Yeah, you could be experimenting with some sort of like Sarah and take out your Maximus or something else, and then play Raccoon and like Starlord, or even just play all of those with your Maximus and maybe cut one or two of the tech if that's not relevant in the meta right now. It's like point slam Sarah with a bit of a bit of tech. I think that could be something we could be exploring with the Guardians. Yeah, that's my take on things. And as much as I've not tried it yet, it did pique my interest. Yeah.
So I agree with that, but the one thing that gives me pause here is just how much Mobius we've seen, and just
Exactly.
how bad that deck is into Mobius. Like Thanos is basically playing Mobius as a matter of course because it's like A Loki, B Mockingbird, and so it's just like you can do that, but is that kind of strategy going to beat even something like discard, right? If you're playing that Sarah deck, and then you're in a situation where you don't have a good Thanos matchup, you don't have a good discard matchup, so what are you actually beating? And you're just sitting there like, I don't know, I'm doing stuff, I'm doing points. It's like, I'm with you. That probably does make the deck better. I just don't think it makes the deck
Exactly. I mean, like all I can say is like, got him. It's just a suggestion.
good. Got him, except it's referring to anyone you baited into playing Sarah.
Yes.
I wanted to offer some praise for the AVX event, the Avengers versus X-Men event that actually just ended. It was, I think, an event that got underrated in the context of, oh, no, everyone's like, oh, this is a fun thing, whatever. But like when I looked at Untapped stats for the week of the event, several of the best decks were just X-Men pile. And
Yeah.
I think that that is really cool. And I think that that is something that like got a lot of people through what otherwise would have been a fairly intolerable Thanos winter, right? Where it's like that week could have been so terrible. And instead of being terrible, I'm not saying X-Men Pile was like the best deck in the game, but it was like probably, I don't know, the fourth best deck in the game during the run of the event. And it just came out of nowhere. It went back to nowhere because now you're not getting a free blue Marvel out of everything. But like, yeah, that actually did something cool. And I think that that is exactly what I want from events like this, where it's like, this is not going to be the best deck in the game for the duration of the event, but it will matter and it will encourage that kind of deck. Because one thing I really liked about X-Men Pile, which I'm going to keep calling it that, it had a lot of small interaction. Things that could win you locations by gaining small edges, like Polaris clogging something or Negasonic Teenage Warhead. A lot of small interactions that you could use to win games. And I just think that like having a deck like that be good is just phenomenal. And yes, it was mostly a Silver Surfer deck. I get it. But it is just good when something like that can exist. It turns out all Silver Surfer needed was to get that 1 point of power back on every card he played. It just
Yeah.
put Silver Surfer back to 3 power, and that deck will exist again, I believe.
Yeah, it's funny how a year ago, like that was actually the actual effect of Silver Surfer, and it was
Mhm.
literally the menace of the meta, right? Like, which is crazy because I think the moment you really get that point back, it will really be a relevant deck again in
Yep.
terms of like buffing enough stuff. Yeah, no, but this X-Men event was interesting for me also personally because like I mentioned a bit in the previous video where I wasn't the biggest like X-Men person or like Avengers person ever, so I didn't really know who was an X-Men, who was an Avenger, so I had to go and learn. And the funny thing is, it's like if you play enough games, like at least I did, I realized how relevant it was to know when I could get the buff, and I didn't know because like it's not like I built an entire Avengers or X-Men deck, but like the amount of like relevant X-Men and Avengers that you normally already play is actually quite a lot. Plus, there's sometimes there's random generation and stuff like that, and you're just like, oh, I somehow have my fourth X-Men that I randomly generated, and it's actually a buff or something like that. So like yeah, I think it's good. It's good fun to be able to like see these interactions and like get and know that they actually matter in the game. I'm very curious what would be a possible like next one they
Yeah.
can do, because like in the past they did Valentine's Day, right? Like the Vision and Scarlet
Mhm.
Witch one. I love that one. That was actually a good combination and good deck. And then now they did the X-Men and Avengers one with relevant buffs because as we mentioned, like 1 point anywhere in a game that like this is super relevant. So I'm just trying to think like what other events they could do. Maybe the next one will be like, I don't know, Christmas or something.
I was thinking like April Fool's Day, and they just
Oh yeah,
like
that's pretty
they do
smooth.
April Fool's Day, and they just like give Galactus +10 power or something.
Oh
Like,
yeah, for one day they totally should. They should. Or like they should turn a random card in your deck into a rock. Yeah, I know people and their
Oh
rock.
my
Yeah, like at the
god.
start of the game, obviously people will hate the game for 24 hours, but like it could also be really funny, right? Like at the start of the game, turn a random card in your deck into a rock that like has like April Fool's signed on it for something
No,
like
no,
that. That'd
no,
be
no. Okay, I've
hilarious.
got it. I've got it. I've got it. I've got it. I've got it.
All right, let's go.
At the start of the game, turn all Infinity Stones in your deck into rocks.
Bruh, that just targets one deck,
Yes,
man.
yes, it does. I solved the meta. Like we did it. We left Cannonball for last because he's kind of mid.
Not balling.
I don't know what to say about this guy, except I think that Marvel Snap has a problem with how to make a 5-cost card, which is to say there are 2 kinds of 5-cost cards. There are Legions and there are Devil Dinosaurs, and that's basically it. And making another Legion, like a 5/7 or 5/8 that requires you to, that or not requires you, but just like says, here's some upside, right? There's just a ton of competition for that. Like not just Legion himself, but like you could play, Black Bolt Stature instead. You could play MODOK in your discard deck, Jane Foster in your Thor deck, right? There's just very few spots for a card like that to actually break through. A card that is like, it's fine. I have no issues with Cannonball. It hits the baseline of this is a card I will consider, and this is a card that can win games, and this is a card that could even reasonably be described as good, but it's not better enough than, like, I don't know, Spider-Woman that it's worth buying. Very awkward. Vision, yes. Like, there's just so many 5/8 upside guys. That's just, it's hard for this card to succeed.
Yeah, so I was playing this cannonball clock deck. Okay, it's just a clock deck that I put a cannonball in.
Yeah.
And like yes, my win rate with the deck is absurd. Like if you check out my untapped, I was like 14-0 in Conquest or something like that. But like honestly, it's more so much because like, I was playing against Thanos and the matchup was just good. And then like the cannonball every single time that I used it to like win a location, my first thought was like Spider-Woman actually does it just better because it's like a 5/12. Yeah.
Yep.
And like you don't have to take the risk of clogging everything for the Spider-Woman to be good. Like
Yep.
the Spider-Woman will be good even if you don't clog. So like yeah, Cannonball is very interesting because if we didn't have Hope Summers for turn 5 Magnetos, if our visions were not 5/8s, maybe we would be looking at it a little bit more. But yeah, on that note, I really do think Vision can go back down to a 5/7. Like 5/8 Vision is just being played like everywhere. On that note as well, since we mentioned it, you mentioned it a little bit just now about Black Bolt. I think instead of like nerfing stuff, I feel like what if we put Black Bolt back to 5/8 and Stature back to 1/7? I think it would actually be super relevant.
I think you do one of those. I don't
not
want to
both.
do both, right? Like, I think that like that gives you the same issue where it's like you just end up saying this is the new good cards shell, and it's not like a super fun one. And I think especially right now when discard, like the kind of discard that wants to discard itself, is the best deck, this is just not the time to be like, yeah, let's make Black Bolt good. Right? It just sort of feeds into what's already good in the meta, and it runs the risk of like your buff not being very impactful until much later. Maybe at some point, but I think right now what I would do, I would buff Stature. That's what I would do.
1/7.
I buff Stature to 7, and I would just sort of see where that took us. Right? Like I think that's, if I were to put the power anywhere in that combo, I'd want it on Stature rather than Black Bolt. Like
Agreed.
that's, I would rather have Stature be 8 than Black Bolt be 8 and Stature be 7.
Okay, now that's scary territory. Can you imagine a 1/8? Like
Oh yeah, can you imagine a 1/8? That now a 1/8, that's crazy. Oh my god, a 1/8. Whoa, let me go play my 0/9.
0/9. Yeah, okay, but this is okay. So that's a 0/9 in Thanos. This is a 1/8 in not Thanos most often. So like
So?
you know,
Like what? You don't want other decks to be able to cheat? Come on. Like we got a 0/7 in discard.
okay, fine.
Like, I don't know. I just feel like it's not that far off what is already happening right now.
All right. Yeah, then if that's the case, why not just give Black Bolt back to 5/8 and then Stature back to the 1/7, right? Like
No,
I think
what I'm
actually
saying
will be
is
fine.
I would rather have Stature, like I would rather have, if
Oh, you
I'm
put everything on the
balancing them,
Stature. Yeah,
I'd rather
everything on the
put
Stature.
all that points on the Stature. That would be how
Okay.
I would approach it. Which is why I don't work for Second Dinner.
I mean, none of us do.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much. As always, Lambie's going to take us out. You will be able to, and please do, like and subscribe on this channel, and you'll be able to catch the next episode on mine. Lambie, all you.
All right, thank you so much for being here with us today. If you like what you just saw, do be excited for the next one that will be on KMBest channel coming up real soon. See you guys. Bye bye.